Hello. Kind of laying back and relaxing here. Guess I should sit up a little bit. So, let's check out the book of Genesis, chapter 30, and we'll back up and read verse 1 again. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" So she said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have children by her." Then she gave him Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged my cause, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she has called his name Dan. And Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "With great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "A troop comes." So she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, "I'm happy, for the daughters will call me blessed." And so she called his name Asher. Now, got a lot of kids now. You know, if you can remember the meanings of the names, and maybe even the storyline here of Genesis 30, it'll help you memorize the names of the children of Judah if you want to memorize all 12 tribes and have them all down. Now, Dan means judge, because God judged her case. Naphtali means wrestling, because she wrestled with her sister. Gad means a troop or a fortune, because now she had a troop of kids once she started having extra kids from Zilpah, her handmaid. And then we have Asher, which means happy. So there you go. Something in all of this that is worth understanding. When we look at some of the stories we read, when we read of Rachel being so desperate to have children, and we look at Hannah so desperate to have children, when we look at Manoah and his wife so desperate to have a child, Samson, right? When we see these stories, it's helpful, I think, to realize just how important it was for people to have children, and just how disgraceful it was for a woman not to bear children to her husband. And so we look at this, and I just a thought that I wrote down in my Bible was the fact that Rachel was willing to share her husband with her handmaid in order to have her own kids. And back then that wasn't unusual. Very unusual for us, for sure, but in the culture, in the times, what we saw going on, having the children was so important that even the idea of sharing your spouse with someone else in order to have kids of your own, it was worth it. It's mind-boggling, but what that can help us see then is for those who would lose their only son, right? For those who lost their only child, for those who are childless, it helps us understand the cost, the value of children. Pausing this real quick question. Over the last 60 seconds, I've seen it go from 8 people to 1 person and then back up again. If you got cut off, let me know. For a moment only, my dad was the only one I saw watching. Just curious if that's real and Facebook's giving me the correct numbers or if people are getting cut off. Anyway, back to this. So imagine the value then that, I mean, I'm a jealous husband, right? And so I can only imagine what it would take, like, to share my wife with another man. I mean, it's disgusting. It's repulsive. But if I realize how much I would be against that, and yet to these people, the value of having children was worth it. They didn't have in vitro fertilization. I mean, we think about some of these things like that, where it's like, I mean, things today we do to, have kids when we weren't able to have kids. This was their way. So then we can see the value of a child. If they're willing to do that to have kids, then that kid must be super important. And then we can go back and we can think about the concept of that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And there's the picture it's always hit so home with me. It's always helped me understand that God could have given the sun, the moon, and the stars. He could have given all the gold of the earth and every diamond and ruby and gem, but none of those things were costly to him because he spoke them into existence. He made them. If Jesus Christ had been a mere man, if he had just been an obedient man and a spirit-filled man, but a man nonetheless, then his sacrifice was cheap, because God could have done that with any man. And yet, if Jesus Christ was God in the flesh, and somehow both God but also the Son, that was something God could not create. That's something that God cannot just give freely. Excuse me for 1 second. There we go. And so, there's a value in the Son. And as it's been said, I think I got off track with some other thoughts, the idea of the value of Christ, but then also, again, the concept that you or we might be willing to lay down our own lives to sacrifice for someone else, someone we love, someone we care about. We would give our lives. And yet the Bible says that while we are still sinners, yet sinning, Christ died for us. So he died for us when we were at our worst. And then again, we might die for someone. But to all the parents, could you ever imagine sacrificing your child for someone? Sacrifice yourself for your child? That's a no-brainer. You're over here today. I've been looking over there this whole time. I'm so embarrassed. Hi. There you are. In order to sacrifice your own child, what would you sacrifice your kid for? I mean, I think we all realize the answer is nothing. Right? I mean, you'd give your life for them, but would you sacrifice your kid to save me? Pastor Joe's going to die. But if you take one of your kids, or imagine your only kid, the other ones were never born, it's just the one, would you sacrifice that child to save Joe? Then it's funny, right? Because I feel like a lot of you guys appreciate me and like me. And yet, it's like you don't even have to stop and think. Love you, Joe. But bye-bye. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I don't care who you are. It's just, you can't do that. And I could imagine the difficult decision to hear your spouse saying, I'm going to die for the kids. You would hate to lose your spouse for the kids. But no one would ever allow to give up one of the kids to save your spouse. Even to save the one whom you love, you couldn't give up one of them. There's a value in children, and there's a value in the only begotten Son of God. The only thing he could not just speak into existence, the only thing he could give that actually would cost him. Imagine that. That God could not give anything else and have it be costly. And so he gave his Son. That is, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer puts it, costly grace. It's free to us, but it came at a great cost to him. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll either see you guys at my church, or y'all better be going to your own churches somewhere, because it's the Lord's Day, and that's where we need to be. You guys take care, and I will see you guys around. I'm looking at you now. I'm sorry about that whole looking over there thing later. That was probably really awkward. All right, here we go.